Nancy Pelosi asked about this, and this is coming from us from Accuracy and Media covered this via Real Clear Politics. And Nancy Pelosi, former House Speaker, former House Speaker, Nancy Pelosi, was taking a question on Obamacare, and she didn't like the phrasing. But then they had a little clip at the end of it where she uses the term Obamacare. Okay, roll it.
Three Obamacare bills on the floor tomorrow in the House. Some Democrats have indicated they might be open to supporting them. How strongly are you pushing members to vote against them? And does it start to become a sign of weakening support if more Democrats start jumping?
Absolutely not. First of all, it's called the Affordable Care Act. If that's what you're referencing, they are going after the Affordable Care Act. Obamacare.
She has used it in the past. President Obama has said, use it. He's claimed it, talked about how, once this thing starts really working, which is always tomorrow, next week, next year, next 5 years. Remember, that's the promise. They really can't point to a time in history when this actually works. They'll draw false analogies to the cost cutting under Medicare prescription drug, but it's still an entitlement. But I digress. Point is this. You hear this. This is trying to rewrite history. And calling it the Affordable Care Act when you have premiums going up on average over 40%, that doesn't seem right. But that's the through the looking class where up is down and down is up in Washington. Affordable Care Act. Call it that. No, I'll call it Obamacare. Because our president embraced it. Why would you embraced it? But this is not something you sit there and go, oh, wow, this is the first time it's happened. No, go back to, let's just stay on Obamacare just for a second. Let's deal with the fact that President Obama, when found out about the lie, about you can keep your health care plan if you like it, period, tried to rewrite history by saying he said something else and added a caveat. Before that, you had 3 days earlier, he was interviewed and they said, gave an apology, and the apology really wasn't an apology at all. They will not admit something, even if everybody's saying, hey, this is right, because they view it as a political weapon. And I understand strategically in the sense that if I didn't have any values and I sat there and I said, yeah, I'm just, excuse me, I have values, but politics trumps them all. The altar of politics is where I make my sacrifices. Then I see how not telling the truth about something, I get it, especially in light of the fact that your policies are failures. And you say, oh, Crane, that's just a general overstatement. Things really work well when the government gets involved. Don't you get it? I mean, why do you hate government so much? No, I want to fix problems. I don't want to sit back and say, gee, let's use something that is terribly inefficient, has not worked, cannot work in the sense of understanding human nature and the way people act in their own self-interest and say, gee, let's keep it up. I think it's stupid. And people say, is it calling people stupid? Well, no, I'm sure there are a lot of folks on the left. I know they are. There are some a lot brighter than I am. And I'm not the sharpest tool in the shed, but I'm not the dullest. And I'm getting it. I understand it, but I've detailed this stuff since its inception. And talked about what the story of the day is. Hey, guess what? If the insurance companies aren't allowed to get bailed out, we're going to single payer. That's the threat. We're going to do it. And this was all 2003, 2005, 2007 quotes from President Obama, Barney Frank. Who? Barney Frank. Talking about the incremental approach. Why do you think Dennis Kucinich got on board? Remember, he opposed Obamacare. Didn't like the payoffs to the insurance company. Doesn't like business. But after a plane ride, he certainly did. Now, I don't know what was said, but I think it was, hey, Dennis, I'm going to get you what you want, which is single payer. You just got to give me the steps to do it. And we'll hold up the American taxpayer. And how will we deflect that? Class warfare. We'll just keep saying things over and over again, accuse them of racism. Everybody hates racism. Everybody violates the 10th commandment in some way through our human nature and resent people that do better than us. So why not just demonize them? And if anybody's successful, we'll really demonize companies that are involved in the area of healthcare, because they're going to deny coverage sometimes. They have to act in their own self-interest and work it that way. And there are reforms that can be made, certainly to the 1% that were not covered because of pre-existing conditions. But we flipped the entire system where 80% of the people were satisfied with the healthcare system that they had and actually liked it. Always could be better for these reforms. And now we look at 128 million people going to be losing their healthcare coverage. Oh, and I haven't gotten into the religious violations of it and the dishonesty when it comes to that. Ben Johnson covered it the other day, Friday. So Bridgegate, as they call it, versus the last 6 months in the IRS scandals, getting back to the MRC on this issue. And it's 88 stories to 2. Now, let me ask you this. If George W. Bush or anybody with an R, they don't have to be conservative, with an R by their name, would have done what they did with the IRS, do you think they would still be in office? Or at least that people wouldn't be fired and there wouldn't be a mass cleaning house? No. And that's what people are waking up to. As this thing drags on, because we're not going to solve it, the crisis will continue because we haven't provided the solution, which, again, we go back to economically. We can look at it, but there is, at the foundation of this, it's cultural. I mean, if you want to look at why people are in poverty, look at the family situation and the breakdown of the American family, and look at the incentivizing of that through the war on poverty. That's what's happened. And if the government's not the daddy, a gang becomes the daddy, and both are very, very bad daddies. And people mock others who say, live biblically. Oh, don't live biblically. You don't know what you're talking about. Yeah, that's just naive. No, it's not. Oh, you think you're better than me. I mean, do you get it? That's the kind of response. It goes back to either racism or envy, or somehow by declaring values and declaring that this would be the right thing to do, somehow you're saying you're better than everybody, and you're pointing down at everybody, and you're up there with God, and you're saying you're guilty, you're a sinner, you're a sinner, you're a sinner, because you point out what sin is or the consequences of sin. Well, I got news for you. Disciple in progress, absolutely fallen, and the only thing that separates me as other believers will attest is the blood of Jesus from my sin. And it's his grace, not my grace. And if I look at the other side of the people that who sin, which I sin, we all sin. But that's not a license to sin. It gets me because we keep pointing out how ridiculous the arguments are, and they manifest in these issues. And all of a sudden, rather than having a discussion like what you heard in the newscast at the top of the last hour, I believe Charlie Butts was talking about social issues and how they're a winner. Yeah, they're absolutely a winner. We need to start speaking them. We need to talk about abortion, what it is, but talk about life of what it is. Not only talk about the heinous act of abortion, but speak to life. Not only talk about homosexual marriage, which totally destroys the definition of marriage, that's why I think, traditional marriage, marriage, you're not going to have, you can't redefine something and say, oh, it's the same thing. We'll call it the same. No, you just can't. But the consequences of that, and I realize we talk about it a lot because it's under attack and people are trying to say, don't recognize gender. What's wrong with you? You're just a hater. No, number one, we believe that is sin. We also know God's plan. I guess that would be number one, and what he's laid out for us. And we also respect common sense and genders, and we also recognize that the line on homosexual marriage, if love, anybody love, well, then you can have marry men and women, and they all love each other. I mean, come on. This is such an easy argument. The only way this gets actual any play is what? It's the emotion again. It's the idea that somehow you could be called a hater. You could be called the Westboro Baptist Church, those nut bars, or the KKK or the Black Panthers, because you recognize what marriage is, or you recognize life and what it is, and you want to pursue protection for it. Oh, and getting back to marriage, we need to talk about how we're not living up to the covenant as Christians, and how great marriage is, and what a plan it is. Hey, listen, it's the good news. It's the fact that we have this opportunity to tell people these things, but they are setting the narrative. They're setting the boundaries. And I got to tell you, I just walk in and I say, I'm not playing on the field, but I'll tell you this. I'll give you the truth about what these things are and why, when you actually don't choose to be willfully blind, how beautiful it can be. And I don't say that as anybody, again, pointing down, pointing it up and saying, thank you, Jesus. There's something the liberals have done. They've taken a Christian conservative perspective and totally misrepresented it. Thank you. It really, yes. But we're playing on that. Now, I'm going to tell you how great it is, how awesome it is, truly. Freedom. Recognizing where your rights come from in God, and recognizing you've been created and God loves you. He has a plan for you and you're unique. I mean, that's awesome, man. Hans von Spakovsky and A Cure for the Case of the Mondays. Jim Hoft on the flip side. AFR Talk.